And good evening. I'm Benjamin Morgan, the Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia, and welcome to our Facebook Live broadcast for the 29th of September 2020. This evening, we will be catching up with Dr. DAME, Sean Runacres, for a quick update on how he is travelling with several of his cases, which we have discussed over the last few weeks. I'll be catching up very briefly with Tony White, who's the president of the Sport Aircraft Association. And of course, our main guest this evening is none other than Captain Rod Lovell. And he'll be speaking to us about his experiences in ditching a Dakota DC-3 into Botany Bay in 1994. Well before the world heard of Sullenberger, we had our very own Sully here in Australia. And it's a really compelling story. And I do invite you all to hang around and to listen to it. So without further ado, I'm going to bounce Sean in. Sean, I see you're home from the clinic and you've raced to have dinner again. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's jump into it. I wanted to follow up with you on how CASA is travelling with Nicole Mitchell. Nicole joined us several weeks ago to talk about the drama and the stress of working through her AVMED problem. And she was really running in circles and going nowhere. So a quick update from you on this would be fantastic.
Yeah, so we were talking about it last week where we said that it had been sent out to an independent cardiologist and the cardiologist was going to respond by the 22nd of September because CASA had already paid them, so we were waiting for that to occur. 23rd, I got a phone call from the doctor within CASA who is managing Nicole's case. Advising that they'd got the independent report back, that the other doctor was not quite so confident about the diagnosis or the lack of significance, and had recommended instead of a coronary angiogram, which was that $10,000, $15,000 test with a 1 in 10,000 chance of dying, they would opt for a CT. So they still put some dye in through her veins, but they're just going to CT her heart as they do that. That's got a far lower risk profile, and Nicole's agreed to that. And then I was blindsided because CASA said to me, and we'll pay for the test.
Well, I mean, certainly we should thank CASA for stepping up to the plate on that one and taking responsibility. Of course, they're pursuing these additional tests. And so rather than penalising Nicole and forcing her the impost and financial pain to have that offered is a great thing. So we do commend CASA. Obviously, one of the other points that we spoke about, Sean, that I'd like to mention as well is that you did receive a direct telephone call from CASA AVMED to check to see if everything was okay and if there's anything that they can help you with, which is also in itself quite remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in 5 years, 1,200 pilots, I think that's the second phone call I've received from CASA. It's a big deal.
I guess, Sean, it goes to show what the power of social media and a little bit of scrutiny and public scrutiny can do in helping clean up situations. And whilst we are critical, I'd like to believe critical in a very constructive way on some of these processes and systems which are broken. I think it's only fair that we do commend CASA AVMED for reaching out and seeing what they can do and how they can be doing something to improve the situation. It does show that CASA are in fact watching the broadcast and listening to the broadcast. We know that because we get a lot of calls from people inside of CASA saying you're doing a great job, keep up the hard work. A little bit of sunshine and UV on the internal workings of CASA will go a great distance in helping clean things up. So for those within the AVMED system that have responded and are working to fix this situation, we do appreciate that work. And what we're hopeful for is that not only can we clean this situation up, but we can see some new systems and processes put in to ensure that pilots will be responded to in a prompt and efficient manner and that the processes take the least possible time that we can. Because ultimately, Sean, we want to get people flying in this industry. We want to see people buzzing around Australian skies, contributing to this general aviation economy.
Absolutely. I guess the only sad thing is that Mark Sullivan, who was very good, he's gone, and Simon May, who's the current principal medical officer, he finishes up tomorrow, and that's two very sad losses to us.
Well, look, we discussed this before. I think all I can say on that is AOPA Australia firmly believes that moving Mark Sullivan out of his role is a catastrophically stupid decision. It was catastrophically stupid. And, you know, he was a very good, positive influence for this industry, and someone that a great number of us throughout the industry had a huge amount of time and respect for. And so I feel deeply sorry for Mark that his career has been interrupted at this point in time. And I hope that that reason finds its way back into the conversation internally inside of CASA, and that Mark can be put back where he can be the most productive and influential from a positive perspective. And I won't say too much more with it because I wouldn't want to give him the kiss of death. It's often been said, if I get behind someone and I say that they're a great person, the next thing is they find themselves on their way out, which is, I'm surprised we keep seeing you back here, Sean.
Yeah, none of those phone calls telling me I'm on my way out yet.
Well, let's keep the public focus there. You never know what we might be able to get done inside of 12 months. Just a couple of quick points I have put up on the screen here below. If you would like to submit your CASA AVMED concerns to AOPA Australia and have us advocate those concerns, we can speak about them and highlight any difficulties that you're going through with the aim of trying to get the regulator into gear, get them out of first gear and get them right up into fifth and sixth so that they're getting your case dealt with promptly. Send them through to ben.morgan@aopa.com.au and we will champion your cause. Of course, we want to make sure that you are an AOPA Australia member as well, because we do need the fuel in our tanks to keep this aircraft on mission. Now, Sean, I've also received this week a number of emails from persons who are having difficulty in dealing with CASA AVMED. But today, or actually last night, I received an email from an AOPA Australia member who sent a letter through to the AOPA Australia board in response to an outcome that he had. I'm just, if I sound like I'm stuttering a little bit, I'm just quickly finding the email. I'm not going to give the member's name out other than to say it was one of the most heartwarming letters I have ever received in all of my time that I've been fortunate to represent not only the AOPA Australia membership, but to represent our general aviation community. And this is a young, I say he's a young guy, I'm 41, so he's young, a 27-year-old guy who at the age of, I believe, 17, was a passenger in a motor car that had experienced a very traumatic road accident. And he had a fractured skull and, that's all right, Siri's talking to me on my watch. Thank you, Siri. It's not weird, the technology is listening to us the whole time. He'd had a tragic car accident. He wasn't the driver responsible for the accident. He was a passenger in the car, and he was quite badly busted up. And he contacted AOPA because he was wanting to start a commercial flying career. And he was really concerned as to how he would advance that commercial flying career, given the challenges that he had faced medically, and the fact that CASA had actually said to him, it's not likely we're going to give you a medical because of all of this. We provided encouragement to this individual that he should not walk away, that he should actually have a go. And we put him in contact with our pilot medical review panel. And through that pilot medical review panel, he was encouraged to take the necessary steps and to allow our representative DAMEs and our medical director, David Hook, to try and advocate his case. And whilst that was going on, he was also encouraged to demonstrate to CASA that he had the mental and intellectual aptitudes to be doing what he wanted to do. He really loves aviation. And so he set off and we put him on a course to say, start doing your RPL and then onward to your PPL theory examinations and show the regulator that you are absolutely determined and you can overcome those challenges. And he did, and he ended up passing those theory exams with really high percentiles. And last night at like 9:30 at night, whilst I'm busy doing a whole bunch of other stuff, I received this email that says, Ben, I'm really pleased to be able to say that I've now been issued my medical certificates without restriction, and I'm now on my way. And he wrote this as I said, it's a heartwarming letter that really, it really woke me up to what we're doing, Sean, and that we're helping people live their dreams and pursue those dreams in this industry. And so, you know, mate, I called him up straight away. It was like 9:40 at night. I phoned him up to say, look, I'm blown away by this letter. Thank you so much for sending it. I'm not going to mention his name, but it's a huge shout out to you. You know who you are. I think that it's absolutely fantastic that AOPA has been able to help make this a reality for you. And he did say that he's now going to be an AOPA member for life. I hope that's correct. And I I look forward to seeing his support throughout the years, and we'll be watching to make certain we get to see when he graduates that commercial license and he takes his start in the world. So thank you so much to all of our doctors, Sean and David and everyone else on our team that behind the scenes work so hard. I know for some of our AOPA members who bring forward issues, it's very difficult at times because there's a lot of stress involved and you want a positive outcome and you want it quickly. Sometimes it takes time. I think in this particular person's case, it was 18 months to get a positive outcome. But it shows that we can do it. We can get those results working together. And so if you do have an AVMED, CASA AVMED concern, your pilot's license may be at risk or it has been put at risk, again, send that information to ben.morgan@aopa.com.au. You'll not only get a response from me, we'll be passing your details on to David and Sean and the rest of the team, and we'll be doing our best to represent you. Well, Sean, anything new on your side?
No, nothing specific. I've got some stuff in the works that I'm hoping to bring through in the next few weeks. But I think it's probably time you heard from some other people, isn't it?
All right, mate. Thank you so much for joining us. Next Tuesday, I imagine you'll be joining us in brief again. We might even have to employ some graphics people to start getting some title sequences done, because this is turning into quite the little TV broadcast each week. But thank you, Sean, for your ongoing support. We really do appreciate it.
No dramas.
Thank you, mate. Well, my next guest is no stranger to the sport and experimental aircraft movement here in Australia, and it's none other than Tony White, the president of the Sport Aircraft Association. Tony, thank you for joining us. I think I'll just get a request here that someone's having trouble hearing me, so I'll move my microphone in. Tony, I've asked you to jump in this evening and have a bit of a chat with us because there's a piece of CASA regulation which is slowly making its way through the CASA halls of power, and where we are hopeful that sometime late this year or possibly very early next year we'll see it introduced, and that's the much anticipated Part 43 reforms. And these Part 43 reforms for the general aviation industry will impact the way in which aircraft are maintained, owned and maintained effectively in this country. And there's no bigger segment of the general aviation industry that are more passionate about owning and maintaining airplanes than the sport and recreational sectors, Tony.
Yeah, hi Ben, thanks for having me on. And absolutely, Part 43 was first mooted by CASA nearly 25 months or 23 months ago. And we all got quite excited about what was going to be in it. Unfortunately, it slowed down a lot, and obviously COVID's had a bit to do with that. But generally speaking, it would appear that it is moving in the right direction. We are looking at what's going on in other parts of the world, particularly the US and Canada. And Part 43 is being Australianised from the US version. And what appears to be happening is that experimental aircraft is going to be included in it as opposed to having a separate part. And the guts of it is that not just builders of experimental aircraft will get maintenance authority rights, but you'll be able to do training. If you own an experimental aircraft and didn't build it, you'll be able to do some coursework training and get some authorities to basically manage and look after that aircraft.
So
Tony,
it's
quite an exciting prospect.
I'm going to jump right in because I've only got you for a very short space of time. I've got to get on to Captain Rod Lovell. I know he's eager. He's sitting in the green room. That's what we call it behind the scenes, isn't it? He's actually quite honestly sitting in his home office. But for recreational and sport aircraft owners, sport experimental aircraft owners, light sport aircraft owners, amateur-built aircraft in this country. I hate the word amateur-built, Tony, because having seen so many of the aircraft your community build, they are anything but amateur-built. But for this segment of the community, what we've seen, what I've seen at AOPA, and I know you and I have had this conversation, Tony, in what the Sport Aircraft Association has seen, is people want to be able to own these airplanes. They want to be able to maintain these airplanes and look after them themselves. These are people who obviously make a very keen and determined commitment to be involved in this level of aviation, but currently under the VH registration system, unless you physically built that aircraft, you are not legally allowed to do so. That's correct, isn't it?
That's absolutely correct. And in fact, unless you are a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer, you're not allowed to touch that aeroplane other than Schedule 8 pilot maintenance, which is very restrictive. And you also have to display competency in being able to do that work. Whereas this change is actually giving the management to the owner to fundamentally manage the inspection of the aircraft. Now, that doesn't always mean that they'll be able to return it to flight, but certainly they'll be able to be a lot more hands-on in managing the aircraft. And if they do the necessary coursework and training to display competence, they'll be allowed to do more and more. And CASA's setting up a 1, 2, 3, 4 tiered system. And if you can do the learning, do the education, then you'll be able to do more and more, which is very exciting for not just the amateur built group, because if you build it, you can already maintain it. But there's a lot of people out there who have moved into our sector, so they're now owners, but they don't have any rights. They have to actually go back and do all of that maintenance with a LAMI or a LAMI shop. So this is quite exciting. It's going to really make ownership just that little bit better, without necessarily putting in years and years of time to build an aircraft. Particularly, it's going to help the LSA group who purchase an LSA. They're going to get more ability to, again, manage their own maintenance. And we're really excited that this is, I guess, the groundwork behind potentially getting all of those old certified aircraft back flying again, because they'll, if CASA goes full tilt, they'll be able to move those aircraft into an experimental category and effectively start managing the maintenance themselves, which will, and I hate to use the word cheap, but it'll make it cost-effective maintenance instead of really highly regulated maintenance for certified aircraft where the manufacturers have put insane cost infrastructures in place which have to be followed to keep a simple certified aeroplane flying. So,
well, Tony, the thing that I love about it, Tony, is this. What we've seen in the last 20 years within the Australian aviation industry is that there is demand for pilots to have a simplified medical system and to fly responsibly under a self-certified medical mantle. The second thing that there's been clear demand is that the sport and recreational sectors want the ability to own aircraft and to have access to do to have access to do courses where they can work on those aircraft themselves. Now, at the moment, the only pathway to do any of this has been through self-administration, which has required the industry to go out and effectively fund all of this on top of the money that we as the taxpayer pay our regulator to look after the aviation ecosystem. And so what I'm really impressed with respect to the 43 reform, and I'm also very hopeful that the continuing work to reform the private pilot medical system will achieve, is that finally we will have, under one central regulatory system, the most affordable way that you can become involved in aviation, that you can participate in aviation and continue through your aviation. And that is actually the key point, being able to come into the system, have access to affordable aircraft, have access to the ability to maintain aircraft affordably. But as your needs and your desires grow within the aviation industry, you simply move up and through into a higher level of licensing, more complex aircraft, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a very exciting time for the aviation industry. And again, whilst we're critical of CASA, and we're rightfully critical of CASA on a whole multitude of issues, we do have to say, with respect to 43, that it appears that this is another area that CASA are starting to genuinely listen to the Australian aviation industry and saying, we need to follow the American model and see to it that there is a real achievable pathway within the system. And so whilst I can't give, Tony, I feel a bit conflicted. We can't give detail out. I really want to be able to sit here and just go blur and give it all out, because I know people will be just as excited as you and I have been on this. But what I will say is that the Sport Aircraft Association and AOPA have made an absolute commitment that we are working together to see to it that the industry will have access to those courses. And we want to be ready. And I know I've been hounding the guys at CASA to say we want to be ready so that when this part regulation is released, the community has access to these courses so that they can get in, they can get involved and start taking advantage of this great new regulation. So I'm excited for it, Tony. I thank you very much for coming along tonight, making some time to put your face and voice to this. It's going to change the shape of aviation in many respects that I think are going to be very positive. There are still some areas I know that the general aviation maintenance businesses are concerned around the way in which Car 30s will be dealt with in respect to this regulation, and I'm hopeful that they'll be able to work through those issues with the regulator. But from a sport, experimental, and recreational light sport perspective, this is great stuff.
It is great stuff, and I just we all wish it would just move faster to get the resolutions, and we continue to advocate strongly for all of these reforms. The medical side of things, one simple medical for all private pilots, regardless of what machine you fly or what registration you fly. One simple system for maintenance. We need cost of ownership, cost of flight, and cost of training to be affordable to the common man, so that we can invigorate the aviation industry in Australia. And we need to learn lessons from our neighbours in this space. The US, Canada, and the UK. I mean, if I can just quickly say that the UK woke up to this a long time ago and basically wanted to get rid of gold-plated regulation and legislation. And they did the reform, and now they've got a thriving industry. The US, the biggest economy for aviators in the world, and we need to listen and take note and follow. It's just ludicrous to me that we have to run an entire massive bureaucracy to be able to do something that probably doesn't even add up to the same aviation level as what California's got. So,
well, Tony, one thing is absolutely clear with this, and that is the 43 reforms were brought forward by the Deputy Prime Minister as a peace offering for the General Aviation Summit of 2018 that SAAA and AOPA both got behind organising. And as many of our viewers would be aware, SAAA and AOPA conceived the idea that we should bring together all of the industry bodies and associations from right across the country and unite those organisations under one banner called the Australian General Aviation Alliance. And the purpose of that alliance was to form an advocacy pact. It's not a organisation that has individual members. It's rather it is an alliance of industry bodies and representative groups that share the vision of a reformed aviation industry capable of supporting growth and sustained aviation activity going forward. And so in doing that, the Part 43 reforms were brought forward and a commitment was made to get the job done. And so, for those that are watching the broadcasts, and you might be sitting there thinking, okay, how do I play a role in all of this? This sounds exciting. The way you play a role in helping bring forward this new era within the aviation industry is to get behind the organizations that are actually advocating for your future. And I know, Tony, I wasn't going to venture here, but I will venture on it to say this. I know there are some that have viewed the strength of advocacy from AOPA with respect to the recreational space, and some have argued that potentially it was AOPA was trying to gun sight the RAA, and this was about RALs. It actually couldn't be further from the truth. This is not about the RAA, and Tony, you and I have had this conversation to death. None of this has been about the RAA. What this has been about is what is in the national interest to benefit the national aviation industry and aircraft owners and pilots, to provide the lowest possible cost of participation that can be achieved, knowing that lowering that cost of participation is going to do the industry an enormous amount of good. And so getting the reforms done under the central regulatory system, driving the regulator to produce results so that those outcomes can be achieved, and being relentless in that advocacy to have the rights of individuals supported. So it's a tough road. Advocacy takes a very long time, and not a lot of people understand or tend to value what advocacy is truly about. But I can tell you, AOPA and SAAA can really hold their, tip their hats on this one, Tony. A great job from the two players of the AGAA there, and I'm going to be looking forward to inviting you on very, very soon when we see that part 43 come forward. So thanks again, mate. Thanks for the support that your organisation shows us, and you're welcome here anytime.
Yep. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, so without much further ado, let's grab our next guest, and here he is, Captain Rod Lovell. Thank you so much for making some time tonight to have a chat. As I alluded to in that brief introduction, well before Sully ever put his A320 in the Hudson River, we actually had our own. And I can remember as a young boy, I say young boy, I probably was in about I dare say I was in year 9. But I remember it was all over the news. You were a celebrity. It was absolutely everywhere that we had this hero pilot who had safely landed a airliner, as it was reported by the news, on Botany Bay. And it must have been an absolute spectacle to the boys in their fishing boats out there to see this big behemoth twin engine, what must have looked like a bomber almost, land on the water. But you managed to put this aircraft safely down. In doing so, you saved the 25 lives on board the aircraft. But what followed was actually quite disastrous. And you went from being, as you say in the title of your book, you went from being a hero to absolutely zero. And so we've asked you on this evening to speak with the AOPA Australia membership and our internet supporters and listeners. And maybe the best place to start is if you could give us a bit of an overview of your flying experience, what got you involved in aviation, how you ended up involved in flying a DC-3 that day, and we'll take it from there. So ladies and gentlemen, Captain Rod Lovell.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much for the invitation to come here this evening. It is an interesting story, and you're quite right in everything that you said. My flying experience started in the Air Force in 1971. I was on the pilot's course there, graduated and went and flew Mirages for a little while before going on to Orion aircraft. So that was very interesting, and I think the Air Force training is second to none. I think that we learn a hell of a lot. Why I mention that too in particular is on Orions, we obviously spend a lot of time flying over the water, probably 80% of the time flying over the water. As such, we practice ditchings, simulated ditchings, obviously, not actual ones. And so that became very handy prop to fall back on in 1994. After the Air Force, I went on to civil flying Learjets and Citations, numerous twin-engine aeroplanes, DC-9s, and actually got a first-class endorsement on a 747 because at the time I was employed by Qantas as a simulator instructor. But obviously that didn't last because of the pilots dispute in '89. So I consider my experience is quite varied, broad, and it's just about all multi-engine aeroplanes. And to be trained and checked out by Qantas, TAA, Flight Safety International, all the big leaders in aviation around the world, particularly safety, things like that. I'm very proud of the way I've been trained. So we cut to the chase now on 24th of April 1994, in which I was working for a small charter company that was actually based in Moorabbin, but had its maintenance done at Camden. So they employed me as a casual pilot for about 2 years prior to this accident. And at that time, I was actually a check and training captain on DC-3s, I think for about 3 companies, which in itself says something about my experience and capabilities, I think. Then in 1994, we were chartered to go to Norfolk Island for a Anzac Day service on the 25th of April, obviously. We were going to go through Lord Howe Island for a refueling stop. And the passengers were loaded in the morning, and we did all the paperwork. We did all the required maintenance, etc. was all done. All the checklists were done. We were checked out by the CAA as a fully fledged charter company, and ops manual, the whole box and dice. We had checklists. Everything was approved. The weight and balance, everything was approved by the CAA as it was then. On the morning, we loaded the passengers and we taxied out, carried out the checklist. Pre-run-up checks were carried out in the run-up bay before we loaded the passengers, which is quite legal and quite correct way to do it. And on the way out, we brief, as every multi-crewed aeroplane does before takeoff. You brief what you're going to do in case of an emergency. And we actually briefed what we were going to do in case of an engine failure on takeoff. We were taking off on 16, which is now 16 right. At that time, there was no 16 left. It was still being constructed. So we briefed that we were going to, if we had an engine failure on takeoff, we were going to continue the climb out, come around to the left and land on runway 25 at Sydney. Straight normal procedures. So we were given takeoff clearance on 16, applied full power, and everything appeared to be normal as normal procedures are. Rotated. I remember rotating because at the time we lifted off the ground, Cathay 101 was given clearance to land. So he was on finals for 16. So it's amazing little things that stay in your mind. At 200 feet, roughly 200 feet, it's very hard to tell, but I'm saying 200 feet. The left engine gave a couple of bangs, and the co-pilot, who was the pilot flying, I was the pilot not flying, pilot flying, the co-pilot said, engine failure, left engine. So I checked the engine instruments, and they gave all the indications of a left engine failure. So we shut it down in accordance with emergency procedures. All phase 1 items were shut down, and then we reconfirmed with the checklist. And we expected to go as we'd briefed. We were going to continue climb, come around and land on 25. What surprised the hell out of me was it didn't go anything like it should have done. Instead of climbing away, it really felt like a drag chute had popped out the back of the aeroplane and was pulling us down, slowing us down. Now, as all good multi-engine pilots know, if you get below VMCA, you basically sign the death warrant of everybody on board the aeroplane. So at that time, I did a lot of quick thinking. What were my options? We had to maintain speed, and we had to go down and recontact the Earth some form. If I landed back on the runway we'd taken off from, anybody who knows DC-3s knows that the gear doesn't go up and down together. One will come up, you can watch it, there's videos on YouTube where one will come up and the other one will think about it and then come up. So I was unsure where the position of the landing gear was. I didn't know whether it was fully up, fully down, or whatever. And I didn't have time to work out what was happening. Also, I knew at the end of runway 16, there were huge rocks. And if we had continued on, slid on the belly or whatever, or ground loop, there was a good chance those rocks were going to slice the fuel tanks open, and we'd be fricasseed in a big way. That wasn't an option. The second option was to possibly have a look at the new runway, which was still being constructed, but there were mounds of dirt, sand, there was machinery, there were trucks, everything there. So that was not an option at all. In the back of my mind the whole time, and it's very hard to sort of explain what it's all about, but at this time, I'm still deciding what to do. If your listeners or viewers remember, in 1980, there was a very tragic King Air accident there, which the gentleman took off on runway 25, had an engine failure, and he tried to make it back to the runway, and very sadly impacted the seawall, killed all 13 people on board, including a 1-week-old baby. that was so powerful in the back of my mind, like you wouldn't believe. And it's all saying, don't let that happen to your passengers, Rod. Whatever you do, don't let that happen. Sacrifice the aeroplane, sacrifice the aeroplane. I'm saying all this in the time, and we had 46 seconds from the engine failure to the time I contacted the water. So all this is going through my mind. 46 seconds to realise that we weren't going to do what the book said we were going to do, and I'd been trained to do all the time. In that 46 seconds, I also had to decide what option I was going to take and then to carry it out. And the only safe option was to ditch the DC-3. And if you remember, I said 10 minutes ago that we practiced simulated ditchings in Orions all the time. So that was not a hard decision to make at all. All I had to do was substitute DC-3 speeds for Orion speeds. So I just carried out the ditching. We had to swerve a couple of times to the right just to miss the pleasure boats who were fishing on the Sunday morning. The impact with the water was abrupt. It wasn't hard or anything like that. It was just an abrupt stop. The aeroplane swung around about 90 degrees to the right to end up on a westerly heading, and it did that because the left engine had been, I thought, feathered, but it was shut down, and the right-hand engine, being a spinning propeller, dug in and swung us around where it contacted the water. At that time, there were horns and bells going in the cockpit because of, I think, a lot of the water had shorted out the electrics, and we tried to silence as much as we could. I turned around expecting to see carnage. I really did. I thought there'd be arms and legs everywhere and unsightly things hanging from the ceiling. I was so pleasantly surprised, like you would not believe, that the kids were standing up, they were donning their life jackets, and people were getting ready to evacuate the aeroplane. That was probably one of the most happiest times of my life. We, at that time, still did the shutdown checks in the cockpit, turning off fuel, turning off electrics, and carrying them out just to make the aeroplane as safe as we could. And we ordered evacuation because the seawater was starting to come in and boats were coming around to help people evacuate, which was really good. Our final, there was a supernumerary pilot that sat in the jump seat by the name of Andrew Buxton, a lovely guy, and he was going along for the ride to gain experience. Well, he certainly gained experience, all right. So he and I finally walked through the aircraft to make sure there was nobody trapped under seats or anywhere. And then we went into, when we were satisfied there was nobody on board, we too hopped in a pleasure craft and were taken to the shore. So that's it in a nutshell.
It certainly must have been an almost surreal experience to be, obviously, to get up out of the seat and to stand there in that alleyway, as looking back to the back of the aircraft, thinking, we've just parked this thing on Botany Bay. It must have been disbelief.
Well, that's right. And the other thing was that there's a lot of stories that say that if you're about to meet your maker, time slows down, time decompresses and slows down. Well, that did not happen. It all happened so fast. It was absolutely incredible. So I was one very happy man when everybody got out and were in boats, and then we gathered together on the new runway. A couple of interesting things about the new runway. I ditched in the position I did because I thought, the survivors or passengers would be able to climb up on the new runway. What I didn't realise until we got there, that I called it at the time an anti-personnel lip, but in fact it's an anti-wave lip that protrudes out from the vertical about a metre or something like that to stop the waves breaking up. And that made it very hard for the survivors to get up. But the fireys came along and actually lowered ladders down so that the survivors could climb up. So no, it was very interesting.
Well, the media certainly reported it at the time that it was a hero miracle recovery and landing, and certainly I took the opportunity. When we spoke the other week, I took the opportunity to have a look through the book and also to take a review of YouTube. And in fact, if you do a YouTube search, there are quite a few news articles that you can now watch of the news coverage from the day that it happened. And then quite interestingly, you can watch some of the news coverage on how the tone changed in terms of the investigators then getting involved in the incident. And so maybe this is a good juncture in which we can start to have a conversation now about what happened next. So you've gone through the surreal experience, you've gone through the elation, it would be elation of knowing that everyone on board has safely got off this aeroplane. When was the first time you had an opportunity to sit down with the powers, the government, to say this is what happened?
Well, just before we get onto that, Ben, there's just one thing that is coming out now in a lot of investigations under human factors and things like that. And I can remember that when I was in the fishing boat, the amount of self-doubt that comes in is absolutely, what did I do wrong? What did I miss? I'm a professional pilot. We did the checklist, we did the run-up, we did all this. So what did I do wrong? So the self-doubt really gnaws away at you, and there's no one or nowhere to discuss that with anyone. So the other thing that I'll say is that on the drive home, and I'm not religious, but everybody says we're here for a reason. And I remember we were driving home through Narellan, and I thought, perhaps that's my purpose in life, and that I did today. So anyway, the next morning, I think it was the next morning, the CAA wanted to have a chat with me, and we went, CAA or Barsi, I can't remember. Barsi, it was at the Novotel at San Susi, and went in there. And the interesting thing is there was a gentleman also in there, John Thine, who was a wing commander in the Air Force, and he was director of flight safety in the Air Force. The Air Force at that time had C-47, so obviously he was full bottle on DC-3 C-47s. He said in the first day, I really told them everything that I thought, as in there was no power in the right-hand engine. I couldn't work out why. And they almost lull you into a false sense of security. They listen and they smile and say, yes, Rod, it's all things like that. So I told them everything that happened, and then I think it was the CAA 2 days later wanted to investigate, and they came along with the same thing. But interesting, the caliber of people investigating, I can still remember an FOI at that stage who said to me, he said, can you remember doing the pre-takeoff checks? And I said, well, no, I can't actually remember it. And he said, gotcha. He didn't do them, obviously. And I said, but I wouldn't have taken off without doing them. I'm a professional pilot. You do these things, but you don't have to remember. And why I mention that is because I spoke later on to a psychologist, and they said, no, you never remember the things that you do repetition all the time. It's if you saw a pink elephant crossing a road, you would remember that. But the things you don't remember, brushing your teeth in the morning, you don't remember lots of mundane things. So so that sort of gave me a lot of confidence. It was only after probably a little while later when I thought things weren't going, I wouldn't say my way, but the investigation wasn't going the way that I thought it should. And this gentleman by the name of John Thine, the RAAF guy, he was asked to leave the inquiry at the end of the first day. And I thought, why is that? And he told me later on, he said that his line of thinking or reasoning or investigation wasn't agreeing with Barsi's. And I thought, hello. So, no, it's just, I tried to say exactly what I thought, but they didn't want to listen. They had made up in their own mind exactly what I'd done. And also too, I believe a rival operator in fact told me that he had rung the CAA and the Barsi that afternoon to tell them why I had crashed. And so the idea is put in their head, so anything that complemented or supported that theory, they put in, and anything that I wanted to say that, the engines didn't work, things like that, they didn't want to know. did not want to know.
So let's talk a little bit about what the actual failure was.
The left engine failed because one of the push rods for an intake valve, and the push rod has a washer either side. So one of these washers was never installed on the pinion, I guess you call it, the rocker arms on, and in fact had lodged in the push rod tube and had been there for a hell of a long time because there were wear marks on the push rod itself. And what caused the engine failure was, at roughly 200 feet or wherever it was, that washer that was around the push rod actually dropped down and lodged under the intake valve, therefore not allowing that intake valve to close. So that every time that cylinder fired, the flame front went all the way through the intake valve. So all the cylinders are already sucking in air that had been already burnt. So it was an engine failure, and there was, the CIA reckoned there was, I could add partial power and things. There was not. Believe you me, there was not. It was like a complete engine failure.
And you were not able to feather the propeller on that engine either, were you?
No, I didn't know at the time. I carried out the checklist, and I think number 4 item or something is to feather the engine. I looked out, the engine had stopped rotating, but again, in a situation like this, you don't have time to have a look and say, well, was it 88 degrees or 65 degrees? It had stopped rotating, and that's all that I could see at the time.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got an investigation which was getting well and truly underway. Obviously, that in itself is producing a huge amount of pressure and stress. The investigation report is eventually tabled. Run us through what the report laid out.
Well, just before that, regarding the my license suspension, the senior FOI, Moorabbin, wanted me to go undergo counselling. He said, "You've stuffed up, you've got to undergo counselling." And I said, "I haven't done anything wrong, I'm not going to undergo counselling." And members in the CAA actually agreed with me. They said, if you attend counselling, you're admitting that you've done something wrong. So I refused to. They actually rang me up and said to me, if you do not attend counselling, we will suspend your licence. Now, if that's not bullying, intimidation, harassment, I don't know what is. So I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So 9 weeks after the accident, they suspended my licence, which was, again, the most devastating day of my life. It really was. But they were very kind, the CAA. They said to me, Rod, we've got a guy down in Canberra writing an examination just for you. And I remember saying, do you think I came down the last shower? I said, as long as my backside points to the ground, I will never, ever, ever sit one of your exams again. And that sort of shocked them and put them further back. So I contacted the FAA and I wanted to get my license back. So I told them everything that happened. I told them how I'd been suspended. I told them about the full circumstances of the accident. And they said, come on over and do a test. So I did, and actually flew John Travolta's DC-3 in the test. And I passed a airline, what do they call it over there? Airline transport certificate in a DC-3. Now, what I like about that, and the guy that examined me, he said, he wrote down to the CAA here, and he said, Rod did a 2-hour oral, and he did a 3-hour flight check, which is double the length of time of a normal flight check for an airline transport certificate. And so the FAA gave me the airline transport certificate on a DC-3, and because of ICAO, the gentleman that suspended my license, he begrudgingly gave it back to me. And can I just read something? And I've got a few notes here, but he wrote in an email that he gave back, and he says, the acceptance by the authority of your recently acquired overseas ATP does not in any way signify acceptance of any actions undertaken by you. Now, I find that absolutely incredible. What do they think I did on the day? So here he is. He gives me back the license, and he's saying begrudgingly, but you haven't really earned it. You know, you're still stuffed up on the day. And I just beyond comprehension. So anyway, I got my license back, and they gave it back to me. I complained to I put in 2 grievance procedures with the CAA, and they investigated their own, and obviously nothing came out of it. And I got papers to show that people lied. They absolutely lied to protect their own job. And I find that absolutely incredible.
I just want to clarify there that you're talking about representatives of the CAA.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I'd like to name them, but I'd better not.
I'd like to name them too, but we better not.
Thanks, Ben. I went through to the Commonwealth. First of all, I went to the AAT for a stay of decision for my licence suspension. And all these things, Ben, they're there, but they're smokescreens, they're mirages. I went to the AAT, and the CAA legal counsel gets up and says the one word safety, and the deputy president said, he said, I'm not prepared to put the tribunal at risk. And I said, the tribunal at risk? I'm the person at risk. Don't worry about the tribunal. I'm the person at risk. And anyway, that was thrown out. I went to the Commonwealth Ombudsman's office, and the Commonwealth Ombudsman's office, who you think are impartial and would not, bend or to pressure, they actually admitted to me that the CAA had egg on their face. The CAA admitted they had egg on their face over me. And I said, well, of course they do, but I didn't put it there. They're quite capable of putting egg there themselves, and they did. But the interesting thing is, and here's a letter from legal counsel of the CAA to one of their FOIs. This is the guy who suspended my licence. And remember, I've gone to the Commonwealth Ombudsman's office to complain about the CAA. Office of Legal Counsel, CAA, says, you'll be pleased with the attached draft letter which I've approved to be sent out by the Ombudsman to Mr. Lovell. I do not believe that we should necessarily alter any of the contents of this letter as it is favourable to us. Right? So the CAA are drafting the letter for the Commonwealth Ombudsman to give me. But it goes further. At the bottom of this letter, this woman who wrote this, Office of Legal Counsel, says, another victory.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely incredible. Have they got notches on their gun or something? How many pilots they can get?
And what year, Rod, was this?
94. This was all in end of
94.
And I wrote to various ministers, John Sharp, etc., everybody, and you just get nothing back. Again, they're mirages, smoke screens. They say, my boys would not do that.
This would be the same John Sharp that's now the deputy chairman of Regional Express.
That's him.
May very well be the beneficiary of yesterday's announcement by the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Michael McCormack, that, without planes in the air, we can't have jobs on the ground. So more money for regional airlines.
Yeah. He actually rang me up after I did an interview with Alan Jones, because I complained to Alan Jones about John Sharp not helping me at all. And he rang me within 5 minutes of the interview ending. And he said, Rod, I've helped you. I've done this and I've done that. And I said, John, you haven't lifted a pen to help me. And so anyway,
how does that make you feel, man? Rod, you train as a pilot, as a professional pilot, never to have one of these situations. That's what you hope. But unfortunately, we know that aviation is in reality, it exists in reality. So these things from time to time will occur. Presented with that challenge, you successfully landed that aeroplane. Everybody survived. You should have been recognised for the work that you did there and held in high esteem for it. But the regulator in your own government literally abandoned you. They walked away on you.
They did, and there's nowhere to turn. That's what I'm saying. 4 government departments have failed me dismally, and where do you go? And right now, in fact, another interesting sideline, if I may, people who may can I just hold this up? And Barzi report, right? That's a Barzi report that you can download, and in there on page 14.
Just very quickly, just for some of our younger viewers that I know that are here. Barzi is the Bureau of Air Safety Investigations, was the predecessor to the current ATSB.
Correct. They moved the deck chairs around and nothing changed. So
Probably got worse.
It got worse. It got a lot worse. So anyway, in that report, which is available to download from the ATSB website, on page 14, they say about there is the right-hand engine, which should have kept us in the air. There were no pre-existing abnormalities in that right engine. However, I have documents from BARSI that were sent to me in about 97, 3 years after the accident, that said that, hang on, I've got to read this. In the left-hand engine spark plugs, once they were cleaned and regapped, right, they either did not fire or found to be electrically broken down. The right-hand engine, which was supposed to keep us there in the air, was also cleaned, regapped, and 11 of the 28 spark plugs were considered unserviceable. And yet, according to the report, there's no pre-existing abnormalities. So the BARSI report is so full of lies, it's absolutely was embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Rod, did you raise, I mean, I'm asking the question, I know the answer. Did you raise these concerns directly to our government? And did you say to them, clearly, I have evidence to show that this accident investigation report is defective?
I have. I've been down to, I was to BARSI twice in 97, I think, and spoke to the 3 senior officers down there. And a lot of things in the BARSI report I said are incorrect. I'm accused of using unapproved charts, which is not true. They were approved, and they've admitted that they were approved. And I said, well, rewrite the report. And they said, no, we don't have to. You know, such arrogance. I can't believe it. But what that does, Ben, they couldn't care less about me. It ruins my career. That BARSI report stopped me getting good jobs because it was actually quoted that, no, you're right, we can't hire you because there's adverse BARSI report against you. It's unbelievable. And I'm a little bit bitter and twisted these days. I'm getting over it. But no, it's just unbelievable that they won't do it.
Well, Rod, it appears not a great deal has changed. I mean, even though the deck chairs have been swapped and, you know, obviously the taxpayer's been fronted with the costs of rebranding BARSI and restaffing BARSI and turning it into the ATSB, the lessons appear not to have been learned. I mean, we've just gone through this god-awful experience of watching the ATSB produce one of the most disgracefully defective accident investigation reports into that last tragic Angel Flight accident, which clearly was not the responsibility of the Angel Flight organisation, but we witnessed ATSB produce a document that makes all kinds of weird and spurious claims about ridiculous statistics and your chances of being involved in a fatal accident if you participate in these activities. We managed to get it taken before a Senate inquiry. They answered before a Senate inquiry and admitted, mind you, Rod, they admitted that they fiddled the data. They called it statistical modelling, but they actually admitted that they didn't interview a single Angel Flight pilot, and they did not survey the Angel Flight pilot base in order to come up with their findings because, I think it was, I'm going to try and paraphrase as accurately as I can, they wouldn't give us the truth if we asked them the questions. And so they modelled this damn report, which came to a conclusion that you're 8 or 9 times more likely to be involved in a fatal accident if you fly on one of these community service flights. It is a ridiculously stupid statistic that is patently incorrect by the fact that there's been just 2 fatal accidents in the community service flight sector in 30, 40 years. And yet if we just open up the ATSB journals into the number of accidents in general aviation, it's blatantly obvious that this statistic can't be true. But they presented this to the Senate and they stood by their report and they utterly refused to shift. And so I really do question whether these are aberrations or whether what we're dealing with on the whole here is a huge toxic cultural tendency to bias and misrepresent accidents.
Well, it is. That's exactly right. No, they will do anything to destroy and mould, etc., what they want, and that's what's incredible. And the other thing which I should tell you too, Ben, is, as I said, in my opinion, there's so many lies in my report, as there was in Dom's report. There's so many lies there. Just recently, about 3 years ago, when I was going to get my book underway, etc., I contacted the ATSB under the Freedom of Information, right? Now, we all know what the Freedom of Information is. It's a fantastic act in which we can get documents, etc. Like I said before, all these things are smokescreens and mirages. They're not real. I applied, as I said, about 3 years ago for documents. All I wanted was documents about the serviceability of the engines and propeller and what they found that way. Do you know what they released to me, Ben? Not one word. Not one word.
What was their justification? What was their legal justification for saying that they could withhold that information from you?
They sent me 9 pages in an email, and everything they quoted was basically not in the public interest. Now, I find that absolutely incredible. Not one word, and they say it's not in the public interest.
Rod, we had a young guy from Western Australia recently who you may have seen him, and again, you and I came to have this conversation because of these broadcasts, and that you saw the work that we're doing to provide a voice to those within the industry who've been wronged, and that they deserve the opportunity to tell that story. We have this young guy in Western Australia who was falsely accused, and he maintains that he was falsely accused by a park ranger about low flying in an aircraft. And very similar to yourself, he's been told by CASA, you will pay a fine and you will agree to this counselling, which means he's admitting guilt. And he has said, no, I'm not guilty. I will not sign and do anything that then you get to record and use against me to say that I am a bad pilot and I've done something wrong. I've never been proven by a court to have done something wrong. You have not provided evidence to clearly say that you actually can prove that I did something wrong. And so in the absence of those things, why would I do this? And so now, he's basically told your lack of contrition now leads us to question your fitness as a fit and proper person. Right. And on behalf of this pilot, I recently wrote to Shane Carmody and said, I think I'd like to meet with you as the CEO DAS, because we've got concerns about how this has been handled, and we don't believe that the actions of the regulator are proportionate. We've been told, take a hike. We don't want to meet with you. We're not interested in hearing anything that may bring into question whether we are wrong. That's what he's saying. Now, he didn't say it in those words, so I want to be clear in communicating this. But let's not make mistakes here, aviation industry. What the CEO DAS of CASA said was, I'm unwilling to listen to anyone from the industry that may be able to present evidence to show we've done anything wrong. Go away, and I'm going to force you to suffer maximum penalties, maximum impost of time, reputational loss, financial costs, the whole smash, because we are not an open and we are not a transparent regulator. There is no just culture. There is no proportionality to our responses. Stuff you, that's who we are. If you don't like it, run away. And so what I'm hearing from you, Rod, is that this isn't something that's just occurred in 2020, or it started happening in 2019 or even 2017. This is 1994, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. And if I may add to that, Ben, you're quite right in everything that you say. They don't want the report rewritten. And do you know why they don't want it rewritten? Because who caused the accident? Do you know who caused the accident? The Civil Aviation Authority caused the accident by not overseeing the maintenance. The maintenance on this aeroplane, to say it was atrocious is being kind to them. It was absolutely incredible, the lack of maintenance. Now, that implies that the CIA was not doing their job. So if it comes down to them rewriting, they're all backing each other up, because if they rewrote it the way that I say in my book with all the facts, and I've got everything to back up everything I say in the book, it's going to open the biggest can of worms. And the other thing which I would say too, Ben, which I think is significant, if they had followed their charter, which they have to do or should do under ICAO conditions, and put out a proper report about the safety of aeroplanes, there is a good chance that the Dutch Dakota Association, DC3, which crashed in 96, I think it was, the loss of 32 lives on board in the Netherlands. If my report had been a factual report, there is a good chance that 32 people wouldn't have been killed, because as a pilot, as you know, we all read reports about aeroplanes that we're flying and we want to know these things. I think it's disgusting that Basi put out this report that may have been instrumental in causing the deaths of 32 people and
Rod, do you
unnecessary.
think the government has been negligent in not actually holding CASA, CAA, CASA, whatever its iteration is there negligence on display here from the federal government in not ensuring that the aviation safety regulator is being run transparently, responsibly, and with genuine safety in mind?
Of course there is. So that is what it's all about. They should be. And you mentioned a while ago, Ben, about the Senate inquiry in 2013. And Senator Nick Xenophon said about there should be a, now what did he actually call him? I've got it here somewhere, that the government established as a matter of urgency the role of Inspector General of Aviation Safety, blah, blah, blah. And that was in 2013. And what's happened now? 7 years later, there's still no hide nor hair of that person that's supposed to oversee. And I think the government is incredibly remiss in not following up Senate recommendations. And as we say, these people in Basi, CAA, CASA, ATSB, whatever they're called today, maybe changed tomorrow, how they can do it, and nobody wants to touch them. The ombudsman, and see little things like there is mooted a federal ICAC, but they won't bring it in. They won't bring it in because all these things are going to come in like you wouldn't believe, and they'll be backlogged for 10 years trying to get through all this stuff. And that's what it needs. It needs a federal ICAC, because this is corruption all the way through.
Rod, if you were sitting in front of the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister right now, what would you say to them? What would be your recommendation to them?
Well, my recommendation would probably be exactly the same as Senator Nick Xenophon said. We need to instigate this office where people can go to and not be, what's the word, sidetracked or intimidated or anything. But see, we've got that, or we should have it, with the Commonwealth Ombudsman's Office. And as I told you, that was derailed in a big way. And yes, the Prime Minister should, and McCormick should. They should listen to what the people want, and it's in their favour to bring somebody like that in to oversee it. But I don't understand why that recommendation 7 years ago has not been implemented. All these things will help the government bodies. They will help the people, but they just don't want it. Because as I said, and I firmly believe it, Ben, if they rewrite my report like they should, there's going to be more than heads roll. There really will. But
the government, if you get the opportunity, as we've had, to sit with people like the Deputy Prime Minister, and at times it's a thoroughly underwhelming experience, let me assure you of that. But you get to sit with these people and you try to impress upon them that there is a real problem. And I've said it before at the Senate inquiry. I don't know if you've seen the video of me saying this, but I've said that there is something wrong with the way in which CASA is running its regulatory platform in Australia. And there is a huge distrust now, a massive void between itself and the industry. Nobody trusts them. Nobody respects them anymore. There are so many dirty, filthy stories coming out of the cupboards of abuses of power, victimization of industry participants, the destruction of people's careers, the destruction of products, the destruction of industry and trade and aviation economy. It is phenomenal, and yet there seems to be no interest and no reaction from the government to say, hang on a minute, this isn't just one voice, this isn't just two voices, this isn't just three voices, this is an entire industry for decades now that has been saying. And Rod, I reflect to the child abuse scandals that eventually led the government to have to swallow the bitter pill that the only way to address the institutional child abuse and sex scandals was to hold a royal commission and to tackle it head on, and to have a commission that ran with enough time to allow the industry to bring all of these stories, because we're not talking, as your case clearly highlights, these are not issues that happened, 12 months ago or 6 months ago that CASA can say, these are issues that systemically have plagued this regulator and clearly are driven by a culture that has existed within this space for a very long time. Would a royal commission be a mechanism in which we could bring forward an opportunity for the industry to get an outcome?
I certainly think it's an opportunity to bring it all to the front. Definitely. A couple of things I'll say, Ben. When I transitioned to civil aviation in '78, then we had the Department of Civil Aviation, and they were highly respected people. If you had a problem, the first thing you did was ring up your local DCA examiner of airmen, and you'd say, look, I've got this problem, what should I do? And they say, well, do this or do that or try this, not a problem. And that, sadly, as you said, it's gone completely the other way around now. Nobody wants to talk to them. The culture has changed enormously. And I'll give you another example of how these people think. I went to, I think it was in '96, when the CAA became CASA, and they had a big talk, snow job, I call it, at one of the hotels near Sydney Airport. And a gentleman by the name of George Wood got up, and I can't remember his position, but he said, I've been in the CAA for 30 years and done this and done that. But today or this week, we're changing over the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. And you know what he said? He said, these are the problems we've inherited. Right? He's been there for 30 years and he's changed from the CAA to CASA, and he has the height to stand up and say, these are the problems we've inherited. And I just don't understand these people. I think we've talked about it, Ben. What I would do if I was talking to the Prime Minister or something, I would say at midnight tonight, you close down CASA. You close it down, and what's going to change? Nothing will change. Professional people will be still professional, and shonky people will still be shonky. Nothing would change. And I firmly believe that.
So the question is, you've written this amazing book, Hero to Zero, which details this, it's a colossal journey, and it really is. I mean, it's something that really the average pilot in this industry will never, ever go through. It's a terrible story. Obviously, the fight is still there, Rod. I mean, are you committed to clearing your name? Would you like the opportunity to stand before the Parliament at an inquiry and to be able to lay the facts out on the table and seek an inquiry to at least try and understand why you've been denied an opportunity for a productive career in commercial aviation because of these decisions by what is really amounting to be quite a dodgy regulator?
It is. I'd be first in line, Ben. I'd be there, not a problem at all. No, I'm going to fight this until the day I die. I really will. And I'm really not asking for much, right? I'm asking for that report to be rewritten and for acknowledgement and recognition of what I did that day. Their big thing of pilot error, and that's all I'm asking for. But geez, I'd love to go to a Royal Commission. I really would, where I could name names and tell them exactly what's happened. It's
You've been in the industry, Rod, for quite a while, and obviously you have your particular experience of our industry. What kind of industry are young people today now entering?
I'm probably not qualified to comment, Ben, because I've been out of sort of professional flying for something like 20 years. I really have. I think the future is not so much in airlines, but in GA, your organisation, and flying training to a lesser degree, because they're not going to need as many pilots, I don't think. But I've shifted my focus a lot now onto the organisation that you're in and who you represent, because I class myself as an aviator more than a pilot. I love getting in the air, feeling the the aeroplane around me, the feeling, the touching, you bond with the aeroplane. I really believe that. And you don't do that in big aeroplanes. You really don't. So I think the future of your organisation, etc., will go on to bigger and better things, because they're in there with us all the time. We've got to do that. People will always want to fly. They really do. And good luck to them. I think it's superb. It's a marvelous feeling. In fact, a friend of mine is going for his tailwheel endorsement later on this week, and I sent him an email today about how things can go wrong in a big way, and he came back and he said, "Oh, Rod, I'm really worried you put the ears up me and things like that." And I said, "That's good, because that's what a tailwheel will do. We've got to teach these people about flying again, about aviating." And this guy will do well. He will, because he's now aware that a tail dragger can bite you in a big way.
Well, Rod, I've just put a link up on screen right down here. If any of our viewers out there and supporters have not already got a copy of this book, I was very fortunate. Rod sent me through a copy and I was able to have a read of it. It is absolutely well worth a read, not only from an insight perspective, but to truly appreciate the thinking and what happens in this type of situation. If you do get a chance, jump on to www.fromherotozero.com.au and grab yourself a copy of that book. Rod will very much appreciate it, I'm sure. And Rod, just in relation to moving forward, obviously I am, as many would like to say, I'm Johnny on the block. I'm the Johnny come lately. I've only been involved with AOPA for the last 4 years. Been involved in and around a general aviation family most of my life, and the industry for quite a few years now. But I certainly would like to see some justice provided for you and some recognition for the fact that what you did that day was remarkable. And so on behalf of our organisation and on behalf of the general aviation industry, mate, you know, congratulations and well done, and thank you for the professionalism that you displayed that day. We need more pilots like you in this industry, mate, not less.
Well, thanks, Ben. Thank you very much for your comments. They're really appreciated. And just exactly what you're saying, I said to the CAA afterwards, I said, wouldn't you like to learn from human factors about what was going through my mind about ditching and things like that? Didn't want to know. I think I could have been a valuable input into general aviation and even the airline industry, because as you know, they don't want to know about ditching. They're not going to happen. But she was right. But I appreciate your comments, Ben, guys.
Well, I raised at the last Facebook Live that we did that, you know, for CASA to be taken seriously about its commitment to safety, which I think is actually quite questionable. They produce a magazine called Flight Safety, and they're so committed to helping pilots in this country fly safely that they produce a magazine that they don't give out. They don't distribute it widely to ensure that everybody has an opportunity to read it and to learn it, but they actually make you pay for it. So you've got to pay for the privilege of them trying to help educate you, which is rotten to the core. And I've said it before, and I'm just going to raise it again. CASA, Tony Matthews, chairman of the board. I know you and I have traded some emails this last week, and I continue to extend an invitation for you to join us on this program and to take some questions from the Australian public who would really like to know more about how you are running Australia's aviation safety regulator. And I'm sure, Rod, you'd love an opportunity to speak with the chairman of CASA about your experiences. But, you know, just like Donald Trump says, you know, where is Hunter Biden? Where's Hunter? Where's Matthews? Where's the chairman? Where are you, Tony? Where are you, mate? We can't hear you. No one can see you. You need to come out of hiding.
Can I just say another thing too, and I'm probably holding you up, I'm sorry. You know, CASA has these, they go around to country airports and they do this safety briefing. And I'm certainly not condemning the people who give it, because I believe they're literally on the drip feed and told what to say. But each one that I've been to, it always comes down, they quote an accident and they come down and they blame the pilot. And every time I've been to one of these, I've stood up and said, it's not the pilot's fault. It's because of air traffic. It's because of this. It's because of such and such. Stop blaming the pilots. But their whole culture, as you've seen tonight, And everywhere you talk is blame the pilot, and it's not. The pilot's the first at the scene of the accident, so he gets labelled with it.
Rod, I've said it before, and I'll make it my closing remark tonight. Let's not regulate, let's educate. Let's support the aviation industry by educating pilots, and let's improve safety by educating people on how we can achieve it and how we can sustain it. There is no future. There is no future for this industry and this country in simply being punitive and disproportionate in applying CASA's powers and enforcement enforcement powers and actions. There is just absolutely no future in it. So, Rod, I really do thank you, and I will also. It's not unlike me to continue talking, but I'll say this: each year, COVID-19 has taken the pants off the industry, and so many of us have just literally been grounded and working from home, and our operations haven't been normal, and everyone's just kind of existing at the moment, waiting for it to end. But when it does end, we, AOPA, the Sport Aircraft Association, the Gliding Federation, and a group of other organisations, we get together once a year up in Narromine. It's called AusFly. It's where grassroots aviation comes together, and we celebrate our passion for aviation, what we love about the industry. It would be our absolute pleasure to have you come up as a guest speaker for AusFly, not only to share your experiences firsthand, and I'm sure people would love to have a beer with you because your story is quite an interesting story, but an opportunity for you as well to be around pilots and to celebrate why we actually remain involved in aviation. So I'm going to make sure that invitation is extended to you. I know if Tony were with us right now, he'd be saying, absolutely, let's get Rod up there. Rod, thank you. And we'll obviously be speaking with you, I'm sure, in the not too distant future.
That's very nice, Ben. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for the opportunity tonight to speak my story.
Thank you, mate. Well, Rod Lovell, no stranger to emergency is he. What an absolute bloody champion. And I know so many of you would be sitting at home tonight thinking exactly as I'm thinking, which is how unfair is it that a professional pilot need be treated this way in this country? Certainly we would think that we're the kind of nation where we would stand these people up and recognise them for their success and their commitment to aviation and their professionalism. And so, we're going to take up the charge on this. I'll be calling on you, Senator Susan McDonald. I know you get a chance to watch these. Senator McDonald, let's do the right thing. Let's bring this man before the Australian government, before an inquiry. Give him the opportunity to put his story forward and allow him to voice the concerns that he has held for the way in which the National Aviation Safety Regulator is handling our industry. And I know that, Michael McCormick, I know you're out there and you don't particularly like me a great deal because I come on here once a week or twice a week and I'm talking about all these problems, and you are the minister responsible for this portfolio. And so I guess the failure does sit on your shoulders at this point in time. I would say this, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, very clearly. You need to fix this. This can't keep going on. We can't keep bringing people on talking about how they've had their lives, their working careers ruined because of faceless, unelected bureaucrats in Canberra who think that they are unaccountable. It's time to hold them to account. And it's time for you, as the Deputy Prime Minister of this country, to start getting serious in holding those people who have so wantonly abused their power to account. And I challenge you to do that. I challenge you to stand up and stand with the people of this country that have worked tirelessly and seriously hard at trying to make aviation work in an environment where the cards have been most certainly stacked against them. So I really do challenge you. So instead of standing in front of a camera and announcing more money for the regional airlines, how about you stand in front of a camera and you take responsibility for a regulator that's now out of control, and you announce some really serious inquiries, and you really get tough on sorting out the cultures and the problems inside of CASA that are causing this industry such grief. And so just on that, and in closing, we were hoping to have Rob Liddell on the broadcast this evening, but we'll be speaking to Rob just a little bit later in the week, and he'll be sharing with us some of his experiences being the head medical PMO for CASA and how he found his time working for the regulator and their cultures. And as I've said to Tony Matthews in some emails this week, there will be some other CASA staff members who'll be coming out to join us on this broadcast to talk about their experiences as well. And those experiences are quite unfortunate, and it really does start to depict the picture that CASA is a highly dysfunctional organisation internally, that is suffering some pretty significant toxic cultures that are stopping it from effectively doing its job in a way in which it can support industry properly. So for those of you within the Civil Aviation Safety Authority that are working your backsides off and trying to support this industry, we are indebted to you. We really do appreciate the work that you do, and not every one of the individuals inside of the regulator are a bad person. It's clear, though, that the organisation does have some pretty significant bad apples in it, and we too would like to see them sorted out so that we can rebuild our trust as an industry into our national safety regulator. So, ladies and gentlemen, members and supporters, I really do appreciate you all for making the time to watch these broadcasts. You have truly made them a great success over the last 6 to 7 weeks, and we'll be back to you all very, very shortly.